Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello everyone. Good day. My name is Tasya Wulandari and I am from 5B class. In this great opportunity, I would like to tell you about the tools of data collection. The first is I will tell you about the definition first. The data collections is also called the data collection instruments. It for developing the instrument itself is an important step in the research procedures, with the function as a tool in collecting the necessary data. The form of instruments and method of the data collections are relating each other. For example, is the if the method is an observations, so that the instrument is using the checklist, and the other and many else the examples. The next is the method can be related to one another. For example, is between the question and the measurements, the answer is not always the answer in the form of a measure, because the measurements can be made through the questions. So that from here we know several allows terms or names. For example, is measurement by observations or measurement through the inquiries or the questions. Go on to the next slide is about the example. It is the exactly example. For example, if there is a researchers wants to know the information far about how the soldiers survive in the forest, so the researchers will use the method in with the pure observation, of course. The first and the other is observations is involved can while interacting, or the other method that the researchers will use is the interview to get the informations. And the instruments is the instruments, if the researchers is using the observation method, he will need the image recorders or writing instruments. And if the researchers is using the interview method, so he will need a voice recorder or interview guide and or writing instruments. The next slide is developing the instruments is developing the evaluation tools or obtaining the data. It means that because the evaluation is getting the data about something that is research, so that can be developed to be so that it can be developed to be instrument researchers. Here, there are two kinds of evaluation tools. The first is test, and the second one is non-test. The first is the instrument form. The instrument form means that in the form, with the name, we know that this form will use the form of a series questions or worksheets, and the function of this test. This form is to measure the knowledge, skill, talents, and abilities of research subjects. For example, when the researchers want to know the intelligence test conducted to estimate the person's intellectual level, so that the researchers will or may use this instrument test form. Go on to the next slide. It's about the form of questionnaire or questionnaire instruments. Again and again, from the name, we are already knowing that these forms is method of collection data. That is, will use the instrument of the form of the questions, the questionnaire sheet, or the number that is written in the questions, with the functions to get the information from the respondent about what he experienced and knew about. And there is something to remember, or there is something important to remember. If we will use this kinds of form, this form is in arranging, because we will give more attention to the beauty of the sheet, to the easy of filling and ease of checking the answers. So that so that checking of the answers. For example, is uh, the researchers is needed to the creating in making the additional table or giving the choosing the color of the sheets and also the decoration of the sheets. Go on to the next slide is the types of the still in the questionnaires form is the types of questionnaires. The first is open questionnaires. Respondents answer in these types is respondents answer in their own sentence, and then the next is closed questionnaires. It means that the respondents just need to choose the answer provided. The next is the checklist. Checklist is we know that from the name a closed list. It will use the closed list, put a check mark on the answer column, and complete with a third statement. After we know all the types of questionnaires, the next types is make a question by considering the number of questions, so that they are not too many or also they are not too few. So the important things that they are adjusted to the indicators data, or only things about the indicators data. The next is interview instrument. What is interview instrument form? It is the form of dialogue that carried out by the interviewer. The function is to obtain the information from the interviewer. With the instrument is called an interview guide that conduct freely, but still remember the data that must be collected. The next is there are types in the interview instrument form. There are two. The first is guided interview. It means that guided by complete and detailed questions. And the next is free guided interview. It means that free to conduct interviews using guidelines that contain an outline. The next is from that we can conclude that actually the power of the interviewing process is lying in the interviewer, so that as the interviewer it is very needed to create a calm, comfortable and friendly atmosphere, so that the data sources can be provide honest informations. And so that and then the researchers can appropriate for researchers who wants to get this form is appropriate for researchers who wants to get the latest information related to the various events. Go on to the next slide is observation instrument form. This observation form is focusing on an object that involving all the signs to get the data. What it means? It means that the observation is the direct observation using sight, smell, hearing, touch, or necessary by the taste. With the instruments used in the observation can be the form of observation guidelines, questionnaires, image recordings, and voice recordings. Go on to the next is still in observation instrument form, but it is the types of the observation form. First is it also divided into two types. The first is observation, or A is observation and B is test. The first is about the observation. There are first observation guidance instrument. It is using in systematic observations or work according to the guidelines that has been created. This guideline is contained a list of types of activities that are likely to occur or activities that observed. And then, for example, is when the researchers want observed in a school, so that the object that will serve observed is written in the sequence for the various events that may occur. For example, is in school, like what I just told you before, the principal gives the directions to the teachers, the picket teachers fills in the material in the class where the teacher is unable to attend. The next types is still in the observation types of observation form. It is the category system. That is an observation that limits the number of variables. For example, is when the researchers want to observe of the principal's performance, so that the results of the observations only conclude the principal's performance, of course. And then the next types of observation form is the test form, with the function to observe the physiology aspect that use the form of a questionnaire to observe the aspects to be investigated, and recorded image and voice recordings used as the data source storage as their instruments. Go on to the next slide is the form of graded scale or rating scale instrument. This form is make researchers easier to know more in-depth respondents' opinions or variables, and it also a subjective measure that is scaled, so that the researchers who wants to use this form need to pay attention more to the carefully in making scales to make the respondents easy to interpret, and also of course to make the respondents to be honest, and so that to anticipate the respondents' dishonesty, the researchers need to be alert to the influence and also guessing the speed of the answer sheet. And then we arrived to the last form of the tools of collection data. It is form of documentation instruments. With this form is the instrument of this form is documentation instruments. Content analysis approach. Examples of seeking historical evidence. With the subject is research subject in the form of books, magazines, documents, even historical objects. The types is, for example, documentation, manual, content, and outline. For the next types is a checklist contain a list of variable of which data is collected, and the differences lies in the intensity of the symptoms studied. I think that's all about my presentation. Thank you for your great attention, and wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.